What's going on, everyone? Kellan Reck here, and today I'm going to show you how to make your YouTube studio go from this to this. So before we even get into all of the lighting and all of the look and the camera and anything like that, the first thing I would suggest you do is invest in a little lav mic. You can get these super cheap and they just plug in a mini jack port. You can plug it right into your camera. I'm using a Zoom recorder in this case to record the audio, and then I'll mix them in editing. But you could plug right into your camera and it's gonna bring up the quality of your audio. The onboard camera audio, which you can hear right now, is just not quite as good as this audio on the lav mic, which you can hear now. And of course, there are levels of which you can get. You can get a nice condenser microphone. You can get a lot of different levels of audio, but for really cheap, you can pick up one of these lavs and they make a big difference in your sound quality. So that's the first thing that I would do when building out your studio. So the next thing that I would do is look at your camera settings. So you can see in this shot, the settings are very, very wonky. We've got a shutter speed of 1/25, we've got an f-stop of 5.6, and we've got an ISO of 2000. The problem with this is that our shutter speed is a little too low. We want to try to get our shutter speed at double our frame rate, so we're shooting at 24 frames a second. We want it about 1/48, 1/50. We want to have our ISO a little bit lower because on these cameras, once you get up near the 2000s, you can start to get a little bit of grain. And we also want to open up our aperture anyway. So by opening up our aperture, we'll get a nice blurry background. The background will fade off and it'll isolate us as the subject. And also, as we open up our aperture, we can of course bring down our ISO as I mentioned before. So it all goes hand in hand in how we adjust these settings. So let's make that adjustment now and you can see the difference. So this is us with the original camera settings. Now let's make the switch. Boom. You can see an interesting difference already. So we've got a little bit of a blurrier background. The background falls off a little bit. It isolates me as the subject. We're now at a shutter speed of 1/50 as we wanted. We have an aperture of f1.8. So right now I'm using a Canon 28mm lens, a fantastic lens for a relatively affordable price. I'll link the video on that up above here. This lens is fast, so it opens up to f1.8, giving me that nice ability to blur the background. And then I was able to bring my ISO to compensate for the exposure. I brought it down to 500, so we're getting less grain. It's a cleaner image overall. So let's move on to some more aesthetic changes here. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna add a key light. Now, what the key light's gonna do is it's gonna provide us with some better lighting than the ceiling lights here. You can see what we have to light this room right now is just literally an overhead light. Looks pretty terrible. This is our setup right now. You can see we're just tucked into a corner. We've got the camera here. We've got the computer in the background and a chair. So these are some of the things we're gonna work with here. We're gonna add a key light and we're gonna try to adjust the way that this whole setup looks. So let's do that now. So I'm just using umbrella lights here, and you can get these for you can get a set of these for probably 50 bucks on Amazon. It's really not too expensive. You can probably find them even cheaper. It's basically a light stand that comes with a bulb and an umbrella, and it works great to create some soft light and to just get you a lot more light than your overhead light in here. Remember, with overhead lights, you're getting a lot of shadows that are coming down in your face and creating this under eye shadow. It just doesn't look good. So you can already see by just adding this umbrella light here and turning it on, we're changing the way things look in the room. Already things look a lot better. We still have the overheads on, so I'm gonna turn those off. And things are starting to get a nicer look. This light is a lot softer because it shoots through this umbrella. So let's get into position and see how the key light is making the difference that we need already to get a much different look in our setup. All right, so obviously we've applied the light and now things are a lot brighter, so we need to make some quick camera adjustments. So I'm gonna close down, or I'm gonna bring down my ISO closer to 100, so we're gonna get an even more crisp image. Again, remember, the higher the ISO, the grainier your footage. So because we have so much light, we have the luxury of bringing down that ISO. So let's do that now. Great, so you can already see that things are starting to look a lot better. We have this nice lit side of my face that's nicely exposed, and then we have a bit of a darker side of my face. Creates a little bit of depth, a little bit of texture, has a nice look to it. And again, in the background, we have that fall off. And obviously you wanna get stuff like a nice seltzer bottle out of the way when you're shooting, of course. So for the next part of this, I have this wall behind me, this just bland wall. There's not a lot going on. So what I got was some sound panels that are gonna help not only bring the sound and the echo down in the room, but they're also gonna give it a cool look. So let's apply those now. So as you can see, it looks pretty good, and you can get these panels for like 15, 16 bucks. You get 12 of them. I only used 9, got a great coverage. So really a super cheap investment to get a pretty good look for your video. So let's jump in and see how it looks in the seat. So you're seeing we're already separating ourselves from the background. We have a cool look back there. It's actually functional because it's making a difference with the audio, and we're starting to get something happening, a look to this. It looks nice. There's a very nice checkered pattern. It's kind of unique. So it's not just a bland wall. So adding something into your backgrounds can make a very, very nice difference as well. Now I want to separate myself from the background a little more. So there's a few things that we can do here. First, I have something already up there. I've got this lightning bolt on the wall. Check this out. Boom. Just to get a little bit of light in the background, we've got that lightning bolt that lights up. A cool little touch. You can grab those online for relatively cheap as well. You don't need a light in the background. I mean, you could just have a practical light in the background. I could put a lamp back there on the desk. I've got the light coming off the computer that makes a nice difference as well. And speaking of the computer, one thing I don't like in this background right now is that you see my second monitor and it just doesn't look nice. And you see all these updates on my screen and things like that. We don't want any of that back there when we're recording. So what I want to do is get rid of those. One thing that I like to do is dial in an actual white balance. Right now I'm on auto white balance, which does a pretty nice job and isn't the worst thing in the world. But if I move around or get up, that white balance may change, might adjust based on the color of the shirt I'm wearing, what's going on in the background, different things like that. So I like to dial it in. I'll go to the K setting on my camera and actually choose a Kelvin, a color temperature for my white balance to be. So let's make that adjustment right now. And you can see that in this case, it's not a drastic change, but it's not gonna change now if I get up, change clothes, do whatever I want here, because the color temperature is set, it's dialed in for the camera. So we're good with the white balance. Now there's one other thing I wanna do here that's a pretty cool look. It's easy to do and doesn't necessarily cost any extra money. So what I wanna do is add an additional background light to spice up this background. What you can use is your phone, and all you got to do is turn on that flashlight. Turn on your flashlight, it gives off a nice light, and we're just going to simply place it behind us to light up that back wall. And you can see it's giving it just a nice tone in the background. Here it is without the flashlight on, and with the flashlight on. It's a cool difference. Makes a nice touch to what you're doing. But I have, from a previous video, the Bowling P1 light, a great light that can do a full HSL scale. You can get a ton of different colors. So what I generally do is, instead of my phone, obviously a little bit more expensive, I'll link it down below, but you can use this light and you can adjust the color of it and the brightness of it, and it gives off just a slightly different hue. So now I've got a little bit of a blue touch over there that kind of matches the iMac on this side. And you can change it up and you can do whatever you want, make it brighter or whatever, you know, whatever you're feeling. But that's something I like to do and have in the background just to make a subtle little difference. So as you can see, there's not a lot that you need to do to make a really nice looking studio setup for your YouTube videos. It's really not too expensive. A lot of it is things that you can just make adjustments to your camera, adjustments to your camera settings, your positioning. You know, I'm tucked into a corner here. I'll show you the final setup from a separate view. It's honestly nothing too complicated, and it's just tucked into a corner of the room here. You can see we've got camera with the 28mm. In this case, I'm using a Canon 5D Mark IV. I've got a little monitor on the top, but you don't need it. This camera just doesn't have a flip out screen, so it helps me set up the shot. I've got my little umbrella light, not expensive at all. And I've got my computer as a background light. I've got my little lightning bolt light here. Again, not something you need, but these sound panels are super cheap and they make a nice background. And of course my light, which you can use your iPhone flashlight to basically do the same exact thing. So nothing too complex here, and it's all subtle changes you can do for really cheap that make a drastic difference in your videos. And my final suggestion, of course, would be to give it a color grade to spice up the look of it. So if we do a color grade here, you can see the original shot, and then you can see how it adjusts when we color correct the footage, just to give it a nice extra oomph from where we are and pop the colors and pop the contrast and everything in that regard. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Like it if you did. Please subscribe, ring the little bell for notifications when I upload. If you have any questions, comments, write them down below. If you enjoyed the video, let me know down below. It really does mean a lot to me. I've got links to all of this gear that I'm using underneath the video so you can check it out. You can see it's really not too expensive, and you can make a huge difference at a cheap, affordable price. So thanks again for watching, and we'll check you back in the next one.